Hey there, crafty friends. This is Jennifer, and today I have one of my really long videos for you. If it's too long, you can always play it at double speed, or you can watch part of it and see the rest of it later. But think of this as a class because it is going to have a lot of ideas for you using one basic tool that you likely already have. And by using this tool, you can create a lot of really fun textured backgrounds, adding really fun details to your cards. Now, I've got a lot of examples for you. You may recognize these cards as I gave you a peek in my last video, which was a review of the Stamp-Timber release over at Simon Says Stamp. Well, today I'm showing you all the techniques I used to make these cards. Okay, so I mentioned that I used one tool to do all of these techniques. And the cool part about this tool is first, it's pretty inexpensive. Second, you likely already have it. And third, there are a few different options that would work for it. So let's start by going over that. What you need to do today's technique is some sort of stylus or bone folder. I will refer to it as a scoring tool. Let me show you some options. The one in the middle is a stylus that I've had for many years. I'll link below to some fun options. That black one on the top is a stylus that comes with a scoreboard, which I'll show you in a moment. And then the white one on the bottom is a bone folder. Any of these options would work great for today's technique. I will be demonstrating with different ones for different cards to show that. Now, there are lots of stylus like this one on the market. Here are some others that I found in my stash. Again, I'll link to a bunch of options below. These are all much older products. And bone folders, there are a lot of different bone folders out there. Here's one that's round like a pencil. Any of those options will work. If you do not have a stylus or bone folder, you could even use any kind of blunt end, even the blunt end of a paintbrush. Now you'll need one of these tools and then also something to score on. In today's video, I'll be demonstrating on a scoreboard. However, stay tuned if you don't have one. So I have a Score Buddy on the left, the Altenew scoreboard on the right. Both of these are great scoring boards. I happen to be using the one on the right a lot because it's a bit longer. And that black fine tip stylus that I showed you earlier comes with that black scoreboard. However, if you do not have a scoreboard, don't worry. You can also use your scoring tool along with many different types of trimmers, such as this one. Many trimmers have a little groove where the blade runs. You can use that groove to do your scoring with the score tool. That's another option. And a third option is if you don't have a trimmer or scoreboard, you can also use some sort of mouse pad or soft surface along with a straight edge, such as a ruler, and then just run your stylus or scoring tool right along the edge. So you can definitely do this technique with any of these surfaces and any of these scoring tools. Okay, so now that we have a scoring tool, it's time to do a bunch of techniques where we use the tool with cardstock to add texture and pattern to our cards. I have lots of examples for you today, hoping you'll give some of them a try. Let's start with this one. You can see the stripes on the background. We did that with scoring. Let's first start with the leaves on the front. For this, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp Fern Corner background die. This cuts a piece that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Now for my project today, I will cut this twice from white distress watercolor paper. Any watercolor paper will work. Now I will also be using the Tim Holtz Distress Mica Stain Sprays. I love these. I've done a more complete video on them. I'll link to it up here on the top right. But today I'm just using these to add quick shimmery color to these watercolor die cuts. Now these you want to shake really well first. And by the way, these are the new colors he just released. I happen to use quite a bit of the mica spray stain here. You do not need to use as much as I'm using. You can use less and then use water with it. You can use water first and then spray it on top. It's totally up to you. If I were to do this again, I would probably put other die cuts in there too to catch that overspray so it wouldn't go to waste. But I'm spraying some different colors in different areas on these die cuts. Now you could do any kind of watercolor or sprays you want here, but what makes these special is that it has this shimmer that has color to it. So when it dries, you have colorful shimmer on top of your die cuts. Very little effort. It will look a little messy at first, but this is one of those products that once it's dry, it'll be beautiful. So this is what it looks like now. If you want the colors to blend a bit more, you can spray it with some water. If you want to add more mica color, you can. So I'll spray a little bit here. You can see the shimmer against my black glass surface. All right, now I'm going to set this aside to dry, or you can heat set it. But don't try to mix the colors. Let it do its own thing. Once it's dry, it'll be beautiful. While I give that time to dry, let's do that scored background. Now for this, I have a piece of craft cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm using my scoreboard and a stylus to do scored lines every 1/8 of an inch. Basically, I'm just scoring along each of the grooves on the background of the scoreboard. You can do whatever spacing you want. For this one, I'm going close together. I like to go over this once or twice to really make that score line, to really make that impression. If you have a very, very fine tip stylus, be careful to not press too hard because you might tear your paper. The more blunt the end of your tool, the harder you can press. Now look at that. After I scored all the way across it, we got this really fun texture. But I want it to stand out even more. So I'm putting that onto a sticky mat. This is the Brutus Monroe Stick and Stamp Mat. And I have a Tim Holtz brayer, one of my favorite tools. One thing you can do is use Versamark ink and the brayer and roll that ink over the raised area of that texture that you created. So I'm rolling it over the bumps we created. However, this is a light colored cardstock, so the Versamark won't show up much. It does a little bit, but not much. If you have a dark color cardstock and roll Versamark on top, it will show up, enhancing those ridges. However, another thing you can do is to use white pigment ink. This will soften the ridges, making them stand out even more. This is Gina K white pigment ink, and check out that beautiful result. Now, that is where I rub the ink on the raised score lines that we created. However, wait until you see the other side. If I flip this over, I have another option, and I like this one even better. So in this case, the background is raised, and those score lines we did are little valleys. So I'm rolling white pigment ink over this, and you'll see how those little valleys stay brown or craft colored, and all of the raised area is white, and I really like the result of this. I think that's beautiful, looks even better in real life. So remember, you can apply ink to either side of the texture you create. I will heat set that so I don't smear any of that white pigment ink. By the way, when we rolled that white pigment ink on, it only hits the raised areas. That's why I used a brayer. A brayer is good for adding ink only to raised areas. Now here I have my dried mica spray die cuts. I love the look of these. You'll see the shimmer here in a moment. I took one and cut some pieces out of it to glue to the back of the frame of another, just to kind of change the look of it. Then I will put glue around the frame and put that right onto our inked and textured background. I wanted to make sure I lined up the frame with the background, so I'm using a trick that I like to do, and that is to use the corner of my MISTI stamping tool. I put my background into the corner, then put the frame with the glue on the back right into the corner too, and that way I know they're lined up nicely. All I have to do is put something heavy on it while it dries. Now for a sentiment, I'm using a new stamp set from Simon Says Stamp and CZ Design, the Sassy Thankful stamp set. This has some hilarious greetings in it, like let us give thanks for elastic waistbands, for post-meal naps, and much more. I also like the greeting that says Happy Naps Giving. However, I'm going to go for a more elegant feel, so I'm just using the Let Us Give Thanks sentiment itself. I white heat emboss that on craft cardstock and use the coordinating die to cut it out. That way I can easily add it anywhere I want on my card. Here's a closer look at that textured background with the white pigment ink. I love the look of it. It's hard to see the texture, but it definitely is apparent in real life. Also, you can see the shimmer from those mica sprays. If you've never tried mica stain sprays, I really do recommend them. It's a fast way to create a beautiful, shimmery watercolor look. I also like that the technique we use for the background with the white pigment ink gives a soft look, and those die cuts with the shimmer have a bold look, and it pulls together nicely. Okay, my next two cards share two more creative ways to use scoring tool to enhance your cards. Now both of these cards also use the same layered stencil piece, so let's start by creating that. To do that background piece, I use the Simon Says Stamp Layered Spooky Stencil Set. I don't normally make Halloween cards much, but this stencil set was so much fun to use. I love that between these 4 stencils, you can create your own pattern paper in whatever colors you want. You could even use glitter paste or texture paste on them to give some dimension. For layering stencils, I like to put my cardstock into a corner of something. I'm using the Waffle Flower stencil mat. You could also use the corner inside of your Misty stamping tool. I have my cardstock in the corner, and then the first layering stencil I'll put in the corner also. Now over this, you can apply any type of ink or glitter paste or texture gel, anything you want over it. Totally up to you. I will be using some basic dye inks with the blending brush. I'm applying different colors of orange over the first stencil. Now, the fun thing about layering stencils is you can keep it simple by doing the same color over the entire stencil and just doing one color. You can maybe put the ink heavier in some areas and lighter in others. But with layering stencils, you can really step it up too if you want to take the time by adding some shading to different areas, which I'm doing here with a darker shade of orange ink and a smaller blending brush. Another thing that you can do to really step up your layering stencils is to do different colors over one stencil, which I'll do with the next one. So let's go to stencil number 2 and put that right in the corner. Since I'm using the corner of this stencil mat, I know it'll line up each time. So this time I'm doing different openings in different colors. This is easy to do if you have a small blending brush or any kind of small inking tool. You could use a sponge dauber, a makeup sponge, anything you want. And for those of you who don't mind getting inky, you could even use your finger to apply inks into small areas. So over this one, I'm doing some grays in areas, browns in areas, and even some yellow in other areas. But if you want to keep it simple, you could do the same color over all of it. By the way, I am putting on the screen the different colors of inks that I use in case you are interested. Okay, now for the third stencil, I do like to put a little piece of tape just to hold it to keep it from shifting. And once again, I'm putting different colors in different areas. It's easy to see through the stencil to know what colors you might want. Now, as far as small blending brushes, there are many on the market, so many. I really like these Altenew detail brushes and also the Simon Says Stamp detail brushes. It just depends on what type of handle you prefer. Now it's time for the fourth and final stencil, and I'll do different colors on this too. By the way, if you do not have detail inking tools or blending brushes, you could always use a regular size blending brush and just mask off different areas so you get the color only where you want it. Now for this one, I did use some charcoal and black ink for the faces on the pumpkins and for the spiders and bats. I like to do the dark gray first and then a little shading with black ink. But what I think would have been fun here is to do like a black glitter paste or some sort of sparkle. Maybe I'll do that next time, but today I just did inking for all of the stenciling. And now it's time for the big reveal. I tell you, it never gets old. I just love taking stencils off, and look at that. Amazing that I was able to create that with this stencil set. All right, so now this is a 6x6 background. I'm going to make 2 cards from it. So I'll cut this down at an angle, and I'll be able to have one card that has a large panel and one card that has a small panel. So save those little pieces you cut off. It's always good to make 2 instead of 1. Okay, now let's do a faux textured metal piece. That's at the top of the card. I have a piece of silver matte cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I'm just temporarily taping that stenciled piece at the bottom. Now I'm placing this into my scoreboard so that the edge of that pattern piece that I created lines up with one of the grooves. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just trying to line it up with one of the grooves. Then I will take a scoring tool, any kind of tool, I'm using a bone folder here, and running right along that. I'm going to hold my paper there and then do another score line 1/4 inch away, which is just 2 little grooves over. And then I'll keep doing that until I have score lines, those diagonal score lines, covering the top of this silver cardstock piece. Now, any kind of faux metal cardstock will work for this, any kind of matte, gold, or silver. You could even use glitter paper or holographic cardstock for this too. I like to go back and forth a few times really to make that impression, to create those little valleys in that silver cardstock. All right, once I've covered the entire top there, look at how cool that looks. Very simple, and it really adds to the top of this card. I cut the excess off so we can save that for another card, and I'll just glue this piece up on the top corner of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. I thought you guys might like seeing me fumble there and drop my piece a few times. I tell you, I edit a lot of that out, but I do fumble quite a bit when crafting. Now on the bottom, I have the pattern paper piece that we created, and the last step then is to add a sentiment across the middle. I white heat embossed the Happy Halloween from this Simon Says Stamp Oh Frank stamp set. This one has been really popular. You can make this fun Frankenstein, changing all the expressions. So many ways you can use this. I'm just using the Happy Halloween sentiment. I white heat embossed that onto a black glossy cardstock strip. Now to add that to our card, I'm putting a piece of foam tape behind it. This is Simon Says Stamp white foam tape. This is new and I'm really liking it. If you know me, I don't love foam tape, but I'm happy with this one and I like the width of it. It's a little more narrow than what I normally use and it works perfect here. So I'll just flip it over and cut the ends off. So there we have our card. The only other thing I added to this were some little graphite colored gems to the background. So there's a bit of sparkle here and there. But it would be fun to use maybe a glitter pen on some of those, or as I mentioned before, some glitter paste. But check out the top of that. It looks like a metallic, like a piece of metal with texture to it, but really it's just silver cardstock with score lines. Easy to do and adds a lot to the card. Let's now make the other card using the other half of that stenciled piece. This time we're going to add sparkle to our score line. I'm starting with a craft note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. You can use any color of cardstock. I just happen to be using a lot of craft today. Now all I'm doing here is scoring only on one half of the note card. I like to start in the middle, this is 2 3/4 inches, and then build a pattern out from there. On my first example, or actually on my first 2 examples, I evenly spaced my score lines. This time I kind of created a pattern, skipping 2 grooves and then going to the next one, skipping 2 grooves, going to the next one. Really, you can do whatever you want, but you can play around with how much spacing you have to get different looks. Notice this time I'm using the fine tip stylus that comes with the scoreboard. This will make thinner score lines. A bone folder would make more bold score lines. So you can play around with the size tip or stylus that you use for your scoring. By the way, I did forget to mention, if you use a really fine tip scoring tool, be sure to not press too hard or you might tear the paper. So you just want to test it out first. Okay, so I covered the entire side of this note card with those fine score lines. If you want them to be bigger, again, use a bigger tip, such as a bone folder. Now we're going to add some sparkle to it. So I am just tracing right inside of the score lines we've already done with a glitter pen. You could use a white gel pen. You could use whatever you want here, even a colored marker. Now you could press hard with the glitter pen and do the scoring with the tip of the pen, but I don't want to damage it. So that's why I did the scoring first and then traced inside each of those lines with the glitter pen. I wish you could see this in real life. It sparkles so much. Now, if you want it to stand out more, you could use like a dark color cardstock, but here I just love the look of it on craft. To finish it off, I'm gluing the other piece of that pattern piece that we created with the Halloween stencils, and then a sentiment strip right across that, again from black cardstock and white heat emboss. The sentiment this time is from the Simon Says Stamp Witch Please stamp set, and I just chose a small one that would look nice along a sentiment strip. Now, it really is hard to see that sparkle in the video, but I tell you, in real life, it's beautiful, and it really adds a lot to this simple card design. It's amazing how one tool, like a scoring tool, can be used in so many different ways to change up your cards. You could even do this on white cardstock and use a different color marker in each score line to create a rainbow. All right, now let's get a little more creative. Instead of doing lines, let's create a diamond pattern. This is definitely one of my favorite ways to use this technique. Here's the Simon Says Stamp Berry Wreath die set. As I mentioned in my last video, this is for sure one of my favorite must-haves from this Simon Says Stamp Stamptember release. I will be using this in so many ways. You can use it for winter wreaths, fall, spring, and summer. You can do different color berries. You could do gems. You could do small flower die cuts. It's brilliant how easy it is to pull together. Now, I just die cut it from cardstock and I glue it together with Gina K Connect. I love that the die cuts just the right amount of different size berries to add to the wreath. And you can use the wreath with or without the leaves added behind. So many ways to use it. Now, this is something that I enjoy doing, assembling die cuts. Thankfully, there's not much die cutting necessary to cut all these pieces, and then all you have to do is glue them together. Now, I'm put quite a few of the leaf die cuts behind the wreath to kind of make it full, but you definitely could use less if you want to save time. Okay, now it's time to create that scored background. Again, I'm using craft cardstock. You could use whatever color you want. And I'm putting it into my scoreboard at an angle. Really doesn't matter what angle you do. Totally up to you. I just put the top two corners of my cardstock piece up against the ledges of our scoreboard. And each of them is at the 3-inch mark. It just seemed like a good place to start. And then I'll tape it there so it doesn't shift. Now, this time I'm using that fine tip stylus that comes with this scoreboard, and I'm just starting there in the middle and scoring by going back and forth. Now, this one you don't want to press too hard because you might tear the paper, so I like to go back and forth a few times just to get a nice impression. I am doing a score line at every 1/4 inch. That means I am going every other groove in the scoreboard. Now, if you have a ruler, you would just move your ruler over each time you do this. But I definitely think for these more detailed patterns that I'm creating like this one, it is helpful to have a scoreboard. A scoreboard is also very helpful in creating a nice scored note card, so it's a good tool to have. All right, so after I've done that side of the note card, I'm just rotating the scoreboard because it's easier to get to this other side. I will shift my pieces of tape over, and I'll end up putting these diagonal lines that are 1/4 inch apart over the entire front of this piece. Now, I think it looks complicated in the video, but I'm telling you, the scoring tool goes right along those little grooves of the scoreboard and scores with no problem. So it really is easy to do. So after doing all of those diagonal lines, let's take a closer look at it. You can see our pattern forming. Now I'm going to take this and put it back into my trimmer, but I'm going to turn it a bit. And I'm going to turn it so that the score lines we created already are horizontal, going side to side along our scoreboard. That really is the easiest way to figure out how to create the score lines in the other direction to create a diamond pattern. So you can see all those score lines are horizontal, going side to side. And now we'll score in the other direction. Again, all of my score lines are just a 1/4 inch apart. If you want to save time, you can space the score lines a bit more and have a bigger diamond pattern. But there's something about putting the score lines close together that really makes for an amazing look in the end. It takes a few minutes to create a background like this, but think about it. You don't need an embossing folder. You don't need a die cut machine. You don't need any kind of specialty cardstock. You just take a scrap of cardstock, add your own score line pattern to it, and it really enhances your card. Okay, so I did half of the card in that diagonal, so now we'll do the other half. I think it's helpful sometimes to rotate your scoreboard to get a better angle or handle on your scoring. Okay, so now we're done. You can see the diamond pattern. It's really a cool look. And the fun thing is you can use either side of this. You can use it so that the score lines are raised like mountains. That's this side here. Or valleys like little dips, which is the other side. I usually, for some reason, use the side where the score lines are valleys. So the background is smooth with little dips. And that's what I'm using here. I'm applying white pigment ink over this again, which is just a fun way to enhance the scoring and make it stand out more. You could do any color of ink you want, which I'll demonstrate later. You'll see one place where I messed up with my scoring. See that line in there? That's okay. Never fear. I'll just cover it with my wreath. Or if you want to, you could smooth it out by using the other end of the bone folder to kind of smooth out that bump. No one will ever see it. Now for the sentiment, I'm using one of my new must-have die sets that my friend Christina Warner designed for Simon Says Stamp. It's the Handwritten Hello. If you've watched my videos, you know I use the Handwritten Thanks a lot. So I asked her to do a hello, and now I'll overuse this one too. It's just a great basic sentiment to have that works with a variety of card styles. So I cut the shadow from white and then the word hello itself from gold and glued that together. Now I've got 3 other hello shadow die cuts that I'm gluing together. So you can see those stacked die cuts there. I'm cutting off the ends of this stacked die cut so that it fits inside of the wreath and doesn't overlap it. This is a trick that I like to do when I want to add dimension over layered die cuts. So I trimmed off some of that. Now I'll glue our nice hello on top. And now this will sit right into the wreath nicely because there's more dimension in the middle and less on the ends. So it sits over the edges of the wreath, but sits nice and smooth. All right, so here is the completed card. I added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. And I also added little red gemstones to some of the berries, which gives a fun sparkle. Once again, I really like that soft textured background with the bold die cut on top. I did use craft and white pigment ink again, but keep in mind you could use any colors of cardstock and any ink on top. It's fun to experiment with the different looks you can get. My next example shows how to create a simple scored pattern in the background that creates a focal point. This is pretty quick to do and something that adds a little bit of texture and interest. I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel here, and I'm drawing a pen line right at the center in both directions. This will just help me to get the spacing of my score lines just right, so it creates a focal point at the center. Next, I'll use my scoreboard to add a diamond scoring pattern to this, a large diamond. So I'm putting this into my scoreboard and I'm making it so the end of this pen line and the end of this pen line are in the same groove. So I'm just trying to line it up the best I can. It really doesn't matter. And then I'll score between those. So you see I have a score line between those ends. Then I will score 4 more times next to that, an 1/8 inch each time. So I'm doing 5 score lines all lined up, one groove after another. And there you can see that pattern. Then I'll move to the next corner, lining up this pen line and the pen line below it with the same groove. And I score that. And then I score 4 more lines right next to it, each groove. So 5 grooves in a row. You can do whatever pattern you want. You can go all the way to the corner. Doesn't matter. Just do the same thing in each of the corners. So there you can see the pattern forming. Now, it's hard to see some of this texture in the video, but in real life, it really makes a big difference, especially on a plain piece of cardstock. All right, so I'm connecting the end of that one pen line with the other pen line by doing a scored line, and I'll do 5 here, and then 5 in the other corner. While I finish this off, I did want to mention this black scoreboard from Altenew. I really like it because the price point is really good. I also like that it's a bit longer, so I can score a full piece of cardstock on it. And I like the tool that comes with it. There's a drawer that holds a tool, but I don't really keep the tool in there because I found it was a little hard to open. So I keep the tool separate, but that's what I normally do with the scoreboard, so that doesn't bother me. I do like the tool that comes with it with that stylus tip. So it's a great scoring tool or scoreboard option if you're looking for one. Okay, so now we have this diamond pattern on our white cardstock. I'll put glue along the back of our wreath and add it right in the center. For a sentiment, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp Extra Talkative Stamp Set. This has a lot of unique and thoughtful sentiments in it, including sending happy thoughts. This card is full of hugs, which I plan to stamp on envelopes all the time. Life is tough, but knowing you makes it easier. Thanks for being my person, and much more. I use the Sending Happy Thoughts. I stamped that with black ink on white cardstock, and then I use the coordinating die to cut it out and added it right to the center of our wreath. I also added some flat gold confetti to the berries. Notice when I tilt this how much it sparkles. That's one of the bonuses or benefits of adding some sort of confetti or gems to your card. It really catches the light nicely. This time I used fall colors for my wreath, which gives it a completely different feel from our last card. And you can see those score lines in the background, which really create a nice focal point for the wreath. All right, now for our next example, one more wreath card, because I'm telling you, I am in love with that wreath die set. Now this time we're going to do a scored pattern and then add colored ink on top. I have a white cardstock panel that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'm doing 5 score lines very close to the edge. Each of these score lines is 1 groove apart, very easy to do. I'm using a stylus this time, but again, use whatever tools you have. It doesn't matter at all. After you've done 5 on one side, you're going to rotate your paper and do 5 along the other side. You can create whatever patterns you want. That's what's fun. Just do the same thing each time you rotate your cardstock. Now I'll rotate and do the sides of the card panel and do the same thing. Now, while I'm doing this, I wanted to mention, I do think this is a technique that works best with the good quality cardstock. Any kind of thin, flimsy cardstock might tear as you do a scoring. That's why I always recommend getting a good quality cardstock from one of our favorite stamping companies. You want something that has a high pound, so like 100 pound or more, and a high GSM. It's hard to find those at a big box store or an office supply store. So I really do recommend checking out cardstocks from our favorite craft companies. They really find the best cardstock and it does work the best. All right, so now I'm applying ink over this. I have my cardstock positioned so the score lines are little valleys, so the bumps are face down. And I'm applying some dye ink on top. Any dye ink or pigment ink, any ink would work. And I'm doing a mix of some colors. Now these will soften and blend into each other, but I wanted kind of an uneven looking pool colored background. Most dye inks will soften over time, so you'll see that once this is dry and absorbed in, we'll have a really beautiful look. The ink only stays on the raised areas, and those little score valleys will stay nice bright white. You could even stamp on this if you wanted to. Now for a sentiment, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp Christmas Blessings stamp set along with the coordinating die. This is a great large set that has lots of holiday sentiments in it and also little sentiments that are great to stamp inside of the card. I chose one to stamp with black ink on white cardstock and use the coordinating die to cut it out. That makes it really easy to add to the center of our wreath. So I trimmed my panel down and added it to a white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I added our wreath and our greeting. You can see on our wreath, I used non-traditional colors, white and pool colors. For the berries, I used kind of a pearly white cardstock along with silver glitter cardstock and also some pool colored pearls. This just shows the many different looks you can get from that one wreath die set. And check out those scored lines in the background. They're nice bright white around that blue color that we added on top. And there is that fun texture. This is a great way, again, to kind of frame your card into whatever you add in the center. Time for our next card. In this case, I created a pattern, and inside of that pattern of scored lines, I added small die cuts. This is a great way to use those small die cuts to create a fun background. I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel here, and I'm putting into my scoreboard so that these two opposite corners are lined up with the same groove. So that's at the 3-inch mark there. Doesn't matter where you do it. But see how I'm connecting those two corners with the score line. Then I'll do another score line that is right next to it, the groove over 1/8 of an inch. Then I'm going to move over to the 4-inch mark and do a score line there. And then another score line right next to that in the next groove. So we have two little score lines right next to each other, and they're 1 inch apart. Now I'll go to the 5-inch mark and do a score line, and then a score line in the groove next to that. Then the 6-inch mark. So basically I'm just creating a pattern as we've done many times. This time you can see there's more spacing between those double score lines. Now I need to rotate my cardstock so I can do the other half. You really could have left it how it was, but I just find it easier to work on this side of the scoreboard. So I relined up those two opposite corner points with that 3-inch mark. And then I do the same scoring pattern where I move over 1 inch and do 2 score lines and move over 1 inch and do 2 score lines. Now we have all of those diagonals in one direction. We'll rotate our cardstock and connect the opposite two corners with that 3-inch mark and do a score line there. Then we'll do one right next to it. Then repeat the same thing we did before. Go to the 4-inch mark and do 2 score lines next to each other. Then the 5-inch mark and do 2 score lines and continue to repeat that. This will create a fun double line diamond pattern in the background with large diamonds. And those large diamonds you could easily fill with little stamped images, embellishments, or die cuts, which I'll be doing today. Once I completed the pattern, it's time for those little die cuts. I used the new Simon Says Stamp Acorn Trio die. This is a great small die set that creates fun, simple layered acorns. I don't know. There's something about these acorns that are super cute. So I created a bunch of acorns from craft cardstock, actually 2 shades of craft cardstock. And I assembled those together and glued them into each of the openings of that diamond pattern. And notice some of the acorns are light colored craft with dark on top, and some are dark colored acorns with light on top. I thought by alternating it would create a fun pattern. So I glued those acorns into the openings of the diamond pattern that we created, and I also added small gold gemstones to where the diamond patterns intersect. So this is just enhancing the pattern that we created on that cardstock using our scoring technique. I trimmed that down and added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. And I added a grateful for you sentiment from the Thanksgiving stamp set, the Sassy one that I showed you earlier. So this shows you how you can create your own pattern and fill it in with small die cuts or stamps. All right, time for our next example. This time, I'm showing how you can take a pierced or detailed background die cut and add even more to it using score lines. Let's start by stamping the birds. These were pretty quick to do thanks to the Simon Says Stamp Printmaking Bird Stamp Set, which has these 4 large images that allows you to stamp the 4 layers of a bird very quickly. So here I've started it, and look how each of the layers of that stamp set line up with the other layers to allow you to add outline and color to the birds. This allows you to make a bunch very quickly. You could even skip the outline, as I've done here, and just use the solid areas and then get a completely different look. If you struggle with coloring like I do, it's helpful to have layering stamp sets like this because it saves so much time. So I did a bunch of birds this way. I did some in blue, green, and yellow, and some in pink, orange, and yellow. And that way I could use them all together on a card. But you can see how each layer lines up very easily with the ones below it. So I continued to stamp all the layers, and here are some of the birds that I got. You can see the ones on the right don't have the outline. The ones on the left do. It's nice that you have the options. For the background, I used the Simon Says Stamp Fab Floral Pinpoint background die. This cuts a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel with that fun pierced pattern to it. For this card, I cut the panel from white cardstock, and I'm going to use a pen on the back of it to create a pattern that I will follow for my score lines. I'm just using a straight edge and a pen. It doesn't matter because it's on the back of the panel. And I'm drawing lines between the petals, the petal pattern that's created with that pierced die. I'll show it to you in a moment, it'll make sense. So I'm just kind of connecting everything together to create this fun little pattern. So this would work great with any kind of background die that has a repetitive pattern, or a piercing die like this one that has a repetitive pattern. So here you can see how I just drew the pen lines right through the centers of those petals of each of those flowers. Now we're going to use those pen lines to create our scored pattern. This is very helpful if you don't want to just eyeball it. You can create your pattern first with a pen and then just follow that pattern. Before we add the score lines to that panel, I wanted to show you a trick that I found helpful to do to my scoreboard. I am using a white gel pen to kind of color in the grooves at the 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and so on points of my scoreboard. So I'm just kind of scribbling this here just to put a little bit of ink down. I do plan to get a white paint pen to put some ink in there. There are many different ways you can do this. But by coloring these little grooves, I'm able to easily line up my pencil lines, which you'll see in a moment. If you have a lighter colored scoreboard, you could use maybe a black Sharpie to do this. So now I have our die cut panel. It's got that piercing to it, and I'm going to score along those pen lines. And because I put that white ink into some of the grooves, it makes it easier to line up that pen line on the cardstock with the grooves on our scoreboard. You don't have to do that, but I found it was helpful, and I think I'll keep those white score lines or groove lines there for future use. So all I'm doing is putting score lines right along those pen lines that we created. So these score lines I'm putting on the back of our pierced die cut panel. So if you don't feel comfortable kind of creating your own score line pattern, you could first draw it with a pen on your cardstock and then follow those pen marks with your scoring tool. So now I'm just doing those vertical lines there, and now we have this fun embossed pattern that lines up with the pattern that our pierced background die created. Such a fun way to add even more to your backgrounds. For a sentiment on this card, I use the Simon Says Stamp Happy Faces stamp set along with the coordinating die. I just love all the positive sentiments in the set. I stamped one of these sentiments and die cut it and glued it at the top of our textured background. Now I have my little birds, and I'm gluing those around the sentiment. I start by gluing them kind of evenly spaced around the sentiment, and then I fill in all the spaces working out from there. That way I can cover the entire background with these fun, colorful birds. I did die cut extra birds from plain white cardstock to glue behind our stamped die cut birds, so there would be extra dimension, but you could skip that if you want. There on the back of the panel, you can see our pencil lines that I followed to get those scored dimension on the front of the card, but no one will ever see those pencil lines. Now I'm just trimming off the excess, and I will glue this panel onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folded black note card. I used a black glaze pen to add a little bit of shine and dimension to the eyes of the bird. And I use a tonic aqua shimmer pen to add some shimmer to the wings and the belly of each of the birds. Little details like this don't take much time, but add a lot to the card. In the end, I decided to change my sentiment to be black cardstock with a white heat embossed sentiment. All right, so here is the completed card. I added one of the extra birds to the inside for a little extra fun. And here you can see that fun texture in the background. We have that pierced pattern and then the score line texture that we added to that pattern, which really steps up the card. Now, things like this really don't make a huge difference to the recipient, but there is such a joy in adding these things to a card when you're creating. And let's be honest, part of the joy of card making is creating, and part of the joy of card making is giving. Okay, now for our last card example, and this one's very different because we're not doing scored lines. We're going to do something a bit different, and I plan to share more of this in a future video. Now for this one, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp Flourishing Bloom plate. This cuts a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel with lots of details to it. Now I cut that from white cardstock, and I kind of left all the die cut pieces together, and I'm sticking that onto a sticky mat just to hold it in place. I find it easier to do this when I do inking on top. I'm applying some Simon Says Stamp ink on top. It doesn't matter what type of ink you use here, anything you want. And I'm doing kind of a rainbow. The key to doing a rainbow is overlap those colors. The more you overlap, the more natural the blending looks. I also do recommend putting down a lot of ink, but doing it slowly. Do a light amount first and then build up that ink. That also helps with the blending. I also like to start with yellow and then work my way over to green. Yellow can be tricky to blend, so by starting with it, you don't have to do as much blending with it. Okay, so after I've done all of the inking here, I can remove my die cut, and I'm adding some shimmer to it. I'm using my Tim Holtz sprayer, and in that sprayer, I have water and Ranger Perfect Pearls, which is a pigment powder. I'll link up here to a video showing more about that so you can make your own perfect pearl mixture. But basically, it's just water with some shine added to it. You can use any shimmer spritz or plain water if you prefer. If you want to skip the shimmer, you definitely could, but the water really does help to blend those inks. After that's dry, I have 2 additional white die cuts from the same background die, and I'm gluing that behind our colored one just to give it dimension. You could skip that, but I really think that dimension makes a big difference in the final card. This time, our scoring technique is much different than the other cards we did. This kind of follows the outside of that die cut that we just created. For this, I'm using the mouse pad in my Misty stamping tool. You could use any mouse pad or soft surface for this. I'm putting a piece of white cardstock on top, and then I have the die we used for our background. I'm putting that face down onto the white cardstock, and then I'm using a stylus or scoring tool, whatever tool you want, to trace around the edges of that die. So I'm just going back and forth over the edges of the die to create a score line that follows the pattern of the background die. Now my hand is kind of over it, so it's hard to see, but I'm just following along the edges of the die. This would be easier with a small die shape, but with this background, I feel it's really impactful in real life. I go over the same area a couple times just to make a deeper impression with my scoring tool. Once I have traced the entire die with my scoring tool or stylus, this is what we have. We have this impression pattern that doesn't look like much, but once we add some glitter to it and our die cut on top, it'll stand out more. Once again, I'm using my Stardust glitter pen and tracing inside of that impression that we made with the scoring tool. It's easy to kind of follow along the groove and fill it in with some glitter. I do find it easiest to do this on top of a mouse pad or soft surface so that the pen just glides in the grooves. So there you can see the glitter that we have inside of the impression. I will now trim this down to be a little bit smaller than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches so that we can glue it to that inked die cut that we created earlier. So here is our inked die cut that's stacked with the white die cuts behind it. I will glue this right on top of the cardstock panel that we created, and I can line up our die cut with the impression and glitter that we just created. I added all of this to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card and added the handwritten hello die cut on top. So here you can see when you look up close that we have an impression outline of all of our flowers and leaves, and it has some glitter to it. I wish you could see it better in the video, but I hope you can capture some of that shine that we get and the dimension that we get. It just helps to enhance the background that we created and add something special to our card. Something like this doesn't take too long, but is definitely worth it. All right, there you have several ideas for using a scoring tool creatively on your cards to add some texture and interest. If you're interested in the supplies that I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description. Also, I've done another video on using scoring tools, and I'll link to that here at the end if you're looking for more inspiration. Also, you can check out the video that I did yesterday sharing all of the new Stamptember products. Thanks for watching this super long video. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you soon.